If you don't know how to ask questions, you can ask live questions, but you could go to holistichealthhour.com. That's our website, and that's where you could ask questions right on the website. So we'll make sure that we get them on the live call. So feel free to chat in questions through the chat function, but we'll jump right away to the questions that were already asked. So let's get going. So first question is, my mother has 3 full weeks using the Rife machine with her cancer protocol. In that time, she's begun experiencing daily diarrhea. Could this be from the body's way of detoxifying? No changes in supplement or diet. What should she do to alleviate this? So, can the Rife machine using cancer programming, cancer frequencies, cause diarrhea? Well, anything's possible with any physiological change to your body. So, yes, I'd say that is possible. So, it could be her body detoxifying. I would start by putting the bulb a little bit farther away from her. I don't know if she's using, um, first of all, I don't know who asked this question. So, I'm not, if your mom is a member of ours, a patient of ours, then we should probably have a discussion on what else she's taking and what else she's doing. So I'm not sure who it was that asked this question, but that should be the first thing. We want to get some more data. If it is truly the Rife and using cancer frequencies and it's causing diarrhea or constipation or any other physiological change, then doing either moving the bulb away a little bit farther away from your body so you're not getting such direct frequency contact, looking at other things in your diet. Even though diet and supplements weren't changed, your physiology might be working better in things that you were doing before that were causing increased gut motility. Maybe you need to back off on. So you want to look at the big picture with anything like this, and not just from a perspective of, is it the Rife? So if your mom is not a patient of ours and she bought a Rife somewhere else and she's doing cancer frequencies, then doing a case review with me and we can discuss some of those things might be in order. Next question. What could be the cause of childhood asthma? What do you recommend for a child with seasonal allergy asthma flare-ups? So asthma and childhood asthma is becoming more and more frequent. Even adult onset or adolescent onset asthma, person who might be in their 20s, 30s, 40s, who's never had a history of asthma before in their life, is now developing symptoms of asthma. So what in the world? I've never had asthma before. Now I have shortness of breath when I start to work out or exercise-induced asthma. So the number one causes of asthma are toxicity issues. It can be a toxicity from a chemical toxicity from the environment, which we're being sprayed in our environment with everything from glyphosates from farms to things overhead in the airways. We're being polluted every which way we could possibly think. Food sensitivities, red and the dyes in foods are a very common issue with asthma. So that's another toxicity issue, but it's toxins that are consumed. Histamine can be an issue with asthma, looking at that person's genes, their HNMT genes, their ability to get rid of histamine in their tissues. That can be an issue with asthma. Chronic lung infections can be an issue with asthma. But with childhood asthma, many times if the child was not vaccinated, so they didn't receive those toxins, it can be food sensitivities. So dairy and gluten are often common issues with asthma. With children less than 6 years old, we don't typically recommend doing food sensitivity testing. We recommend doing a food elimination diet. So try doing, eliminating the most common foods that would cause an increased inflammation in the lungs and the airways and into the tissues. And that would be, starting off, would be dairy, gluten, the gluten cross-reactant foods, and egg, soy. I would get rid of dyes, red dye, green dye, blue dye, all the dyes in different foods. Just try to clean up the environment. Another common issue with childhood asthma can be fire retardants in clothing. Babies' clothing, I think, from a legal perspective, anything that you're going to buy from, the department store or something like that is going to have fire retardants in the material, and it doesn't just wash out. So getting organic cotton, I know it can be expensive to make these changes, but it can really save a person's life long term. So cleaning out the person's diet, cleaning your house as far as what you're using for detergents, what you're using for soaps, what you're using for cleaning products, trying to have a clean environment. It's hard because there's fire retardants in your furniture. You buy a new couch, there's fire retardants in it, new chair, there's fire retardants in your carpeting. So it's very difficult to try to get rid of this stuff because it's everywhere. So it could be an expensive endeavor. Maybe just, do certain groups at a time to try to see if that can calm down. If the child is old enough to eat, let's say they're 2, 3-year-old or higher, using antihistamine type nutrition, we have a product called Clear His Junior that is a chewable, quite tasty, a natural antihistamine. It's got quercetin and some things in it that can be good for kids. If the child is older and can swallow pills, using some antihistamines. As far as from a natural perspective, we have multiple different natural pills, capsule form, that you'll have to swallow. Certainly you could open those things up and put them in a smoothie as well. Cleaning up the child's diet is going to be a big thing, though. Next question. Using a dung coil, how do you determine the correct frequencies? You can waste years playing around with the wrong ones. Well, so a dung coil is usually sold as a frequency generator, frequency machine to help kill pathogens in Lyme disease. It's very common in the Lyme community. But in truth, a dung coil is not really a Rife machine. So how I define a Rife machine, so a Rife machine is a frequency generator that uses light frequencies. A dung coil, to my understanding, is really more of an electrical generator, which makes it fall into the category of a pulsed electromagnetic field therapy equipment. So it's more of a PEMF, which is great. But then you're not really concerned about the frequencies. You don't have much play in with a PEMF to play with the different frequencies. I know different PEMFs, you can use certain different frequencies, but it's in a range that isn't going to be, it isn't going to kill pathogens. So the purpose of a PEMF machine is to help stimulate your cell membranes, help stimulate your immune system. All your cell membranes hold a charge. So your cells have a membrane around them, and they have a charge that is actually measurable. You can actually measure that charge with some different pieces of equipment. And as a person's cell charge goes down, their health gets worse and worse. There's articles written on this. There's much research in the cancer field with looking at a person's phase angle. That's what a measurement of somebody's cell charge is. And as that person goes through a series of care, typically most cancer research is done while a person is going through chemotherapy or a course of standards of care. If their phase angle remained level through that course of care, their chance of survival was much higher than somebody whose phase angle or cell charge was dropping significantly. So often when a person is ill, they'll have a lower cell charge when phase angle is measured from 0 to about the highest I've seen is about 12. And a normal cell charge or a normal phase angle on a person is about, you want it to be over 6.0. I've had people that were fairly healthy, even in their 70s, that were in the 7s. I used to treat some of the Minnesota Vikings players that had a cell charge over 10. If you're younger, you're going to have a much higher cell charge. But as we age, our cell charge or phase angle drops. And as we become sick for whatever reason, our cell charge can drop, so our phase angle will drop. But if our cell charge is staying level or going up through a series of care, your survival rate is much higher. Well, that is a huge benefit of the PEMF. The PEMF, including a Doug coil machine, can help people through survival methods, through cancer, through Lyme disease, because it helps increase one's phase angle. So that can be very helpful. Well, how does that really help? Well, if you increase somebody's phase angle, you're increasing the health of their cell membranes. If you increase the health of the cell membranes, you increase the health of the cell. So inside of each cell in your body is literally like equivalent to New York City. Everything that's going on in New York City is taking place inside your cell. You have thousands of different organelles, and you have, of course, a nucleus, which you have DNA, which then replicate in order to make a new cell. The DNA also codes for making enzymes, making proteins, all sorts of different things that you need for that cell to survive and that cell to do its job, whatever that cell is, if it's a muscle cell or heart cell or whatever it is. So the health of the cell membrane is of utmost importance to the health of what could go on inside that cell. So as far as getting back to the question, how do you know the frequencies to use with a person? It depends on what you're trying to do. So we don't use Doug coil machines in our office. We use a different type of Rife machine called a True Rife machine, which is very easy to program literally whatever frequency you want to run within the program of the machine. So there are known frequencies for different diseases. So let's say if you have prostate cancer, you would want to run just the known frequencies for prostate cancer. You may want to run frequencies for other comorbidities that you might have with prostate cancer, maybe inflammation, maybe you have metastasis to bone, you want some bone building frequencies, and you have issues with detoxification pathways like everybody does. You might want to run some liver frequencies or key frequencies, but you build that around what's needed for the patient. So there are frequency charts that are available to the public. You could even Google Rife frequencies. There's documents that are PDF documents that show different frequencies. Again, I don't think you'll be able to really use your Doug coil with these frequencies, but if you had a GB4000 or a True Rife, you could program those frequencies in. That's why when a person comes to us and let's say they have a specific disease or cancer, then we'll write a specific program that they'll run literally all night long. Because these frequencies aren't magic. And that's one big mistake that people make when they use a Rife machine or a PEMF. They think that using it for 20 to 30 to 60 minutes a day is going to cure them of their malady. And that's just not true. You're hitting the body with those frequencies so that you can stimulate a response. In the case of trying to kill a pathogen, with light frequencies, you can kill a pathogen directly. But when you're dealing with like cancer, you're not killing directly. A cancer cell is your own cell, and it's much sturdier, for sake of a better word, than a single-celled organism like a bacteria. So you're not going to kill directly. You're not going to cause lysis of the cell when you hit a cancer cell with the frequencies that you're trying to disturb that cancer cell. What you are doing when you use Rife technology, light frequencies to help kill cancer, you're stimulating that cancer cell so it vibrates so that your immune system will now take another look at it. Because that's a huge problem with cancer, is that cancer is not an outside organism. Cancer is your own cells that something got in the cell, damaged the nucleus, and caused it to go into rapid replication. And it's replicating cells that are also damaged, have damaged nuclei, and are in rapid replication. That's what cancer is. One cell that started rapid replicating, rapidly, and continue. Now you have this mass of cells that are have damaged nuclei and are in a state of rapid replication, but they're still self tissue. Now, your immune system is not supposed to destroy self tissue. You have a fail-safe mechanism for your T cells and your natural killer cells to not destroy self tissue. So you have to get the immune system to look at this cancer over and over and over and over again until it sees it as an enemy and will destroy it. And that's the benefit of using the Rife. You're stimulating those cancer cells so they vibrate, so it's an irritation in the body, so your immune system will look at it to try to kill it. So there are known frequencies for many, many, many different pathogens. There's known frequencies for different cancers, and those are the things that we do in programming a Rife machine. So I do agree. You could have the greatest tool in the world, like a frequency generator. If you're not running the right frequencies for your malady, well, it's not going to help. So I think the two best Rife machines on the market are the GB4000, which is much more difficult to use, so we don't typically use that, and the True Rife, which is much easier to use and easier to program. But again, you can run a True Rife for if, let's say, you have prostate cancer, again, and if you're running the wrong frequencies, it's going to do nothing to your prostate cancer. So if you're running just some general cancer frequency set that maybe you got from the company or from a practitioner who isn't real experienced, well, it's going to have little good. It's going to do little good. It can never do harm, but you're going to do little good, and well, that doesn't help. Okay, next question. I am wondering your thoughts on my husband's problem. When he gets bit by any kind of bug or gets into poison ivy or poison oak or crepe myrtle tree, he will have the itching, redness, and swelling at the bite and contact site, but then also in other areas where he was not bitten or touched by plants that he is allergic to. Do you think the histamine pills would help eliminate this systemic itching problem? So why would a person be hypersensitive to different poisonous plants? Okay, so most people, if they get the oil on them from poison ivy or poison oak, will create, their skin will be irritated by it. They'll get hives. It'll be itchy, and then if they itch it and they touch other areas, they're spreading it all over. Most people will have that experience, but some people end up with a hyper reaction. So it gets all over their body, and their whole body becomes inflamed. They might have been told that they're very allergic to that thing, which may be true. Your body can develop antibodies to a toxin. So let's take a step back. So when you get an infection, so let's say you're exposed to a strep throat. Your daughter comes home from school, she had strep throat. You breathe it in. That's a bacteria. So that bacteria enters your body, you end up with an immune reaction. So that acute immune reaction is what's called a Th1 response. It causes this uptick of inflammatory chemicals called cytokines. Your histamine response may kick in for even a pathogen, and it calls in these immune cells to kill the pathogen. But let's say it's a particularly virulent strain of strep that you've never seen before in your body, and you get quite sick and you get a fever. That's a hyper Th1 response. That's good, because you need that Th1 response to bring in these immune cells to kill that pathogen. And then let's say your health wasn't really good, your stress was high at that point in time, and you get really sick, so you have to take the next day off of work. You got a really bad sore throat, but you didn't go get antibiotics. You just kind of waded through the course, and you drank some chicken soup, and you slowly recovered. What happens in your body is that Th1 response isn't able to kill it. Within about 24 to 48 hours, it will suppress. Then you'll kick in this B cell response or a Th2 response, and that's responsible for making antibodies against that strep. You want to do that. if you have antibodies now circulating against that strep, it's going to tag that strep and you're going to be able to better kill it. Better, even more important is now you have those circulating antibodies and they don't dissipate. They can stay with you for years. And now every time, let's say 2 months from now, you get exposed to that same strep or even a similar strain, you have those antibodies to tag it and you're able to kill it quicker and you never do get sick. And you're like, boy, I have a great immune system. I don't get sick. Well, what makes a great immune system is you have a lot of antibodies to a lot of pathogens. So therefore, you never get a fever. You don't feel ill because those antibodies will tag those pathogens that you're exposed to. You're still exposed to just as many pathogens as anybody else, but I don't get sick because I have these circulating antibodies that tag that pathogen so my immune system can kill it quite readily. Problem comes in is that when you create antibodies to things that are not living, so toxins, poisons from plants, poisons from our environment are not living organisms. So if I develop antibodies to those non-living organisms, I'm going to create this inflammatory response, which is not going to be good. So an inflammatory response to a toxin is not really helpful in a sense that it's going to kill the toxin because toxins aren't killable. So the purpose of our body to create an inflammatory response to like a poison ivy is to keep us away from going into that grove where the poison ivy was. So it keeps us safe so that we won't go into something and be exposed to a poison that could, damage cells and could kill us. So that's the purpose of an inflammatory response. A person that has a hyperinflammatory response to these things may have developed antibodies. If you develop IgG antibodies, you'll end up with this hyper response every time you're exposed to it. Some people even develop IgE antibodies, which then is a very hyper response at the time of exposure that could cause all sorts of things and could put somebody in anaphylactic shock and could potentially cause death because of the inflammation after exposure. So that's somebody with an IgE reaction to peanuts per se. But you could have IgE reactions. You could have IgE antibodies to mold. Those are the people that walk into moldy buildings and go, oh my gosh, I can't take it. I can't be in here. I got to get out of here. I got to leave. And everybody else is like, what is wrong with you? I don't smell mold. If they have IgE antibodies to mold, they are hypersensitive to mold. They'll smell mold when nobody else smells mold, and they got to get out of that situation or they feel like their throat's going to close up. The same thing can be true when you're exposed to environmental things. So how do you deal with these things? Well, you know that you're you hyperinflame to bee stings. You know that and it can be different things. So let's say a deer fly. Some people can be hyper-reacted to deer flies, but they're not hyper-reacted to horse flies, two different types of flies, but they have different venoms. Some people can be hyper-reactive to poison oak, but they're not hyper-reactive to something else. So, how do you deal with this then? Well, once you know it, you have to try to prevent the exposure. Number two, you should have an EpiPen just to make sure that you don't have ever developed IgE reactions. So you can prevent, serious condition if you're exposed to these things. Number three, taking antihistamines can be beneficial. Over-the-counter antihistamines, medications, I mean. Taking antihistamine supplements can be beneficial. So what's in like our clear histamine scavenger is quercetin and larch bark and a bunch of different things that are known to help pull those toxins out of your body, pull histamines out of your body, to calm down mast cells. Mast cells are the cells that make this histamine and cause this inflammatory reaction. So long answer to what I could have done quite quickly is the answer is yes, these things may help. But I would also caution you, you can develop IgE antibodies to things over time if you're exposed to these things. So having like an EpiPen may be a safe thing to do as well. Next question, is there a risk of disintegrated cancer cells going somewhere else in the body and causing problems? What happens to the cancer cells that are destroyed using a Rife machine? Good question. So if the Rife works, could you end up a Alzheimer type reaction because killing these cancer cells and it's causing waste from these cancer cells to affect the body? So the short answer is this: no, this is not going to happen. And the reason is that the Rife doesn't work. So there's different ways cells die. So cells can die from normal programmed cell death called apoptosis. So apoptosis takes place when a cell actually the term is blebbing in on itself. So the cell kind of inverts on itself and starts breaking in part, and it has actually recycled. So a lot of the cell material inside the cell, including the cell membrane, what makes it up, a cell membrane, the phospholipid bilayer, is reutilized by the body, reutilized by other cells. So it's actually really a recycling of cell material. So when a cell is destroyed, even through your T cells and your natural killer cells, they stimulate what's called an extrinsic, from the outside, apoptotic reaction. So the cell goes through apoptosis. So you don't end up with toxins. The cell doesn't explode and cause toxins to be dispersed in the extracellular matrix that need to be carried away by the lymph system. That takes place in what's called a pathological death of a cell. A pathological death of a cell is a process called cell lysis, where the cell membrane does break apart and kind of explode. And it produces a lot of waste, which is called endotoxins, waste from within. And that has to be carried away through your lymphatic system because it makes a mess in the extracellular matrix. That's the matrix of fluid and waste products between cells, and then that's carried away through your lymph system, and then that has to go through detox pathways. That is a problem when you use the Rife for killing single cell organisms. So if you're using the Rife to kill bacteria, you can and you will produce endotoxins. So you'll produce waste from that bacteria. Now, it's usually not a problem unless a person has huge issues with their detoxification pathways, unless you're killing a certain type of bacteria called gram-negative bacteria. Gram-negative bacteria, Lyme disease, Borrelia burgdorferi is a gram-negative bacteria, H. pylori is a gram-negative bacteria. If you kill those too quickly, the other thing with gram-negative bacteria is that they have lipopolysaccharides in their cell membranes, and those liberate, and those can cause an inflammatory reaction and cause what can be known as a Herxheimer reaction. But to answer the question, when you're killing cancer cells using the Rife, typically using any other natural approach, you're not going to cause a Herxheimer reaction. You're not going to cause endotoxins to be produced. You're not going to overwhelm detox pathways. Side note on that, you will do that with chemotherapy. Chemotherapy kills cancer via lysis and through apoptosis. So you can produce endotoxins when you use chemotherapy. That it can be part of why a person feels ill post-chemotherapy. Of course, the other reason is that chemotherapy isn't going to be exclusively killing cancer cells. It will be killing healthy cells too. It can damage the blood-brain barrier, cross the blood-brain barrier, cause inflammation of the brain, causing all sorts of things. So while chemotherapy can be great to kill cancer, it causes other ill effects as well. So, okay, next question. Are you familiar with factor V clotting disorder? Yeah, I think that's Leighton's disorder. If so, how do you treat it and keep a patient from clotting? What's the effectiveness of nattokinase versus lumbrokinase? etc., for something like this. So typically, a person doesn't even know they have that until they end up developing some clots, um, and 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 then they're maybe screened for that if they developed, let's say, um, deep vein thrombosis. This is the second time they've developed it. Then they may get screened for that, and they find out they have that. So factor V is a genetic mutation. You can have a single or double allele defect on that gene. People with a double allele defect are going to have even more difficulty, and they will develop more clots. At least have the chance of it. People have difficulty in pregnancy having that factor. So if they've ever had clot formation during pregnancy, they will be watched and screened for that. I think from a medical standpoint, unless you have a history of having clots, they're not going to necessarily recommend you go on a drug for this unless you're having issues. Plus, I think it depends on other factors, other comorbidities. Does this person have high cholesterol issues? Are they worried about possible heart issues? Do they have a history of heart attack, a history of cardiovascular disease, things like that? From a natural perspective, so what are your best anti-clotting things from a natural perspective? Garlic. So garlic is going to be your best blood thinner. Your omegas can be decent blood thinner as well. Things like curcumin can be a slight blood thinner. Garlic is going to be by far your best blood thinner. As far as what can gobble up clots, nattokinase, lumbrokinase are your two enzymes that you'd use to gobble up clots. There's some thought that just high dose enzymes in general can be beneficial, but those two enzymes would be the best. So if I knew I had that disorder, I'd be taking a product with nattokinase and lumbrokinase in it. This has been a common concern since the certain what came out, after that certain what disease came out a few years ago. And when they came out with the correction for that involved a needle, people are having all sorts of clot formations. So using a lumbrokinase product, using garlic can be extremely beneficial as a preventative measure for those people. The only thing that I'd say, you can't really hurt yourself taking garlic and these enzymes unless you are on a blood thinner. So the enzymes are fine even if you're on a blood thinner, but taking excess garlic, if you're on a medical drug blood thinner, you really got to watch, because garlic works really well. And I've known people that got off their blood thinners because they didn't want to be on a medication anymore. So they used garlic instead. So you have to be careful doubling up. So if you're on a medical blood thinning drug and you're using garlic, you better be very leery of excess bleeding, easy bruising and all that kind of stuff. So, but what's worse, having a little bit of easy bruising and capillary fragility, and that's not going to really kill anybody unless they end up with a bleed or if they have an ulcer or something like that, versus a blood clot. So you do have to be you have to weigh that all out. Next question. My husband has, for years, had periods off and on where he continually burps. Oh, it can start and then go on for several hours. Sometimes he has gas buildup for hours after going to bed and then goes on in the night. Or it can start off in the morning, empty stomach even. Or when he walks or exercises, he lifts things. Any clues? Okay. So, yes, my first thought on this is he probably has a hiatal hernia. So I actually have a video on our website, how to help yourself with a hiatal hernia. So a hiatal hernia is, so you have a ring of muscle down at the bottom of your esophagus that constricts and holds your stomach basically down. So that ring of muscle is in the diaphragm. So you have a diaphragm that separates your lungs from your abdominal cavity. But you have things that have to go through that, like your esophagus has to go through that. And then your stomach sits below the diaphragm. Well, that ring of muscle, where what holds the stomach down is called a sphincter. So a sphincter holds the stomach down and it keeps it there. So problem is you breathe. So your diaphragm goes down when that's how you take a deep breath in. And therefore your stomach is supposed to drop down with the diaphragm. So your stomach literally drops down in the abdominal cavity several inches every time you take a deep breath. If you have adhesions up in your neck from injuries to your neck, let's say you had an auto accident years ago, or you just hurt yourself playing football or something, so you have a lot of adhesions in your neck in here that can adhere to your esophagus way up here. If you have adhesions in your diaphragm, if you have weakness of that sphincter, then that sphincter isn't holding the stomach down, and a part of your stomach can literally herniate up through that sphincter. That's called a hiatal hernia. Hiatal is hole, it's going the herniating through the hole in the diaphragm. So a hiatal hernia is when your stomach can herniate up, and often that part of the stomach can just bubble up there. So the top part of the stomach can bubble up in there, and you can have this, continuous slight hiatal hernia in your stomach, and then air gets trapped in there, and you belch a lot and you burp a lot. You can get a lot of pain in your down there. You could actually get, because it's carried on the same neurological pathways that feed your heart, you could get what's called a pseudocoronary with a hiatal hernia. So a hiatal hernia can cause a pseudocoronary event. So a person can feel like they're having a heart attack, and it's actually irritation of the stomach at the sphincter there. So if you go to our website, www.connorsclinic.com, and you search hiatal hernia, Hiatal hernia, you'll see I have a blog post. I actually have a video I'm teaching my staff and teaching one of my staff how to pull down that stomach. If you have a hiatal hernia where it's completely herniated and it's a medical condition, it's going to be much more serious, where you have to have surgery. But 99 times out of 100, it is more intermittent hiatal hernia, so it can bubble up there. Most of the time, it's tied to also a decrease in hydrochloric acid production in the stomach. So I do have a blog post on hydrochloric acid issues. So look up HCl or hypochlorhydria, and look up my blog post on that as well. 9 times out of 10, hiatal hernia is tied to that. Hiatal hernias are extremely common in little babies. That's why little teeny infants can have projectile vomiting, because that sphincter isn't perfectly formed. So the baby's drinking mama's milk, and it just goes right up into that bubble. The bubble is called the Magenblas of the stomach, and it can literally just, when the diaphragm constricts, it just shoots right out, and the person can have projectile vomiting. The little baby does. Typically, that doesn't happen in an adult, but they get a lot of pain down there. They get a lot of belching. They feel like there's something right at the bottom of their sternum, and it is an air bubble at the bottom of the sternum that's pushing up into the diaphragm, and it can be very irritating. So hiatal hernia, functional hiatal hernia, what you're dealing with, and it's something that it just doesn't go away by itself. You have to continue to work on it, continue to pull it down. If you go to a chiropractor that does kinesiology, they know how to fix that as well. But it's not just a one-time thing. You really got to do it yourself on a regular basis as well. Okay, let's see if we had any other questions come in while I was chatting. And I think that is it for the day. So remember to go on holistichealthhour.com, and you'll see all our past episodes, and they are indexed quite nicely. So you should be able to find, other questions that we've answered that might meet your needs. Also, highly recommend you go on our website. We have well over 1,000 blog posts. Our YouTube channel has well over 1,000 videos too, and our video channel that we had to create to protect ourselves from the powers that be at YouTube has even more videos. That's videos.connersclinic.com. All right, website, connersclinic.com, and the holistichealthhour.com invites you to ask your questions. Thanks so much, and see you next week.